He lifted everything English football had to offer. But not everyone lifted their hands to him. Emlyn Hughes lived like there was something chasing him. He ran faster, talked louder, smiled wider than most men were comfortable with. He didn't play football, he invaded it, and once he took the captain's armband, he never let go. Even when it slipped off his arm, it still clung to his name. Inside the dressing room, people chose sides. He didn't ask them to, he just made it impossible not to. Some said he was the heartbeat. Others called him the virus. It depended where you stood when the shouting started. And it always started. There were players who never looked him in the eye. Players who couldn't forget what he said. Players who couldn't forgive what he did. And players who hit him so hard you'd think it was personal. Because it was. What followed him wasn't admiration. It was friction. It was sharpness. It was unfinished business. That's what made him matter. That's what made him dangerous. That's why some names never left his mind. If you know that feeling, when applause fades and memory turns cold, subscribe now, because what's coming next was never meant to be forgiven. Before Emlyn Hughes ever faced the wrath of a rival crowd, he faced something colder. A silence inside his own dressing room. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a personality clash. It was war, and it never ended. The moment he was handed the captain's armband, something cracked in the foundations of Liverpool Football Club. Because to Tommy Smith, that band didn't belong to Emlyn. It belonged to him. Smith had built the walls. Hughes had kicked open the door. They were never friends. They barely spoke. And the few times they did, it was worse than silence. Smith watched Hughes climb, watched him flash the grin, give the interviews, wave to the fans, and collect the glory. And in his chest something turned hard. It wasn't just jealousy. It was belief that Hughes had taken something sacred and made it about himself. And then came the match at Highbury. May 1972. A title on the line, and Hughes leaned in. According to Smith, he whispered that Arsenal players were willing to throw the match for £50 a man, whether it was real, bait, or madness. It changed everything. Smith walked away. He told no one but Ian Callaghan, and from that day forward, whatever thread still existed between them was gone. Smith would later say, "I hated scoring for Liverpool, because Hughes would come up and congratulate me. I hated him." He called him a showman, a fake, a man whose friends came out of a vending machine. He watched Ron Harris take Hughes out with a brutal challenge and smiled, because even when the fight was outside the club, Smith refused to stand beside him. They wore the same badge, they held the same trophies. They stood shoulder to shoulder in Europe. But there was nothing shared between them. Not loyalty, not trust, not even eye contact. This wasn't a disagreement. This was two different codes of football, two different kinds of warrior. And in Tommy Smith's world, Emlyn Hughes didn't belong. He wasn't the type to forget. And neither were they. Chelsea had their own code, and Emlyn Hughes had broken it. What happened in that old League Cup tie never left their minds. Peter Osgood's leg, gone. And in his head, the cause had a name. They never needed to shout it. They just remembered it. And years later they responded. When Ron Harris struck him down at Anfield, it wasn't just a tackle, it was a receipt. Tommy Smith didn't run in to defend him. He walked toward the man who dropped Hughes and said, "I could get to like you." No confusion, no hesitation. The message was sharp. There were clubs Emlyn fought, and there were clubs that circled. Chelsea were the second kind. Peter Osgood didn't hide his opinion. He said what others didn't want to say on record. Everybody hated Emlyn. Not because of one match, not because of one moment, because of what he brought. The energy, the noise, the way he lit fires and smiled through the smoke. Every time Chelsea lined up against him, they brought more than football boots. They brought memory. And the grudge never left the tunnel. Some reputations are built on loyalty, others on defiance. And some, on a single moment frozen in time. There was no punch, no blood, just a tangle, a fall, and a look toward the referee. What happened between Emlyn Hughes and Bill Garner at Stamford Bridge wasn't a war, but it left a scar that never healed. The whistle blew, Garner was sent off, and Emlyn stood up, untouched, expression unchanged. The reaction came fast. Fans didn't wait for replays. They didn't need to. Because some things didn't require proof, only memory. From that day forward, in pubs, in terraces, in whispered rage, he was no longer just Crazy Horse. He was something else. They called him a cheat. Not every fan, not every opponent, but enough to make it follow him, enough to make it echo louder than a tackle ever could. The name stuck in the mouths of men who never forgave him for that walk away. That look, that absence of guilt. He could fly into tackles that emptied lungs, and they still remembered this more, because a brutal challenge you can respect. But a fall that earns another man a red, that was different. That was theatre. And even if it wasn't, they never believed otherwise. There were no words before the collision. Just a corner, a scramble, a clash of bodies. In the middle of it, Hughes, and then Clarke, a hit that stopped time. Blood came quick. Emlyn on the floor, eyes unfocused, silence where noise had lived seconds before. And Tommy Smith didn't move, didn't shout, didn't flinch. He looked down at his captain and said calmly, maybe even fondly, maybe that Clarke's not such a bad bloke after all. That was all. No argument, no support. Just that line. Because for some players, there was no loyalty worth pretending. Not when they felt the wrong man had the armband. Not when every bruise was seen as deserved. And for Clarke, that challenge wasn't revenge, it was instinct. The kind of tackle Leeds were built on. Fast, sharp, unapologetic. Leeds didn't play to share the game, they played to steal it. And Hughes to them was the kind of figure you aimed for. Loud, flashing, captain. Easy to target, hard to miss. The moment passed. The match moved on. But for 1 second, on a pitch full of enemies, Emlyn Hughes bled, and his own teammates smiled. That's what it meant to wear that shirt, when the room behind it wasn't united, when leadership was given but never accepted. It didn't happen on the pitch. No tackle, no foul. Just a sentence dropped like poison into the air. Highbury, May 1972. Everything on the line. Derby waiting, Liverpool needing a win. That day, Liverpool failed to win. Derby took the title. The whisper lingered, and Smith never spoke to Hughes again, off the pitch or in private. From that moment forward, it wasn't just rivalry, it was disgust. And whether Hughes meant it, believed it, invented it, or tested it, the damage was real. Trust didn't bend, it broke. And from Smith's eyes, that single moment proved everything he already feared. That Emlyn Hughes wasn't cut from the cloth he respected. That behind the volume was something he'd never accept. No crowd heard it, no match report recorded it, but it stayed. Longer than most careers, longer than most friendships. Some moments never get shouted, they just stay quiet, forever. He was never built for corridors, never moved like someone who waited his turn. Emlyn Hughes had his own rhythm, and sooner or later, the men in charge stopped clapping to it. Don Revie gave him the captain's armband for England, then took it away after 2 games. No ceremony, no warning. Alan Ball wore it next, and Hughes was left chasing something he thought was already his. They brought him back for Rome, a match England would rather forget. No redemption, no real return. He was in, then out, then nothing. Bob Paisley didn't shout, he just started picking other names. Alan Hansen arrived. Hughes moved to the bench. The armband still sat in his shadow, but the club was moving on, and nobody told him out loud. One mistake in an FA Cup semi-final, and the door quietly closed. No grand exit, no farewell, just a transfer to Wolves. A name on the sheet, then gone. At Rotherham, he tried to lead again, player, manager, fighter. Took them to 7th, their best finish in years. But when the slide came, the board didn't hesitate. They asked him to resign. He said no. So they made the decision for him. From country to club to second-tier boardrooms, the pattern stayed the same. They gave him power, then pulled it back. Not with confrontation, with silence. Because some men don't fit inside institutions. They burn too hot, talk too fast, move too loud. And when the walls start to crack, the system removes the problem. Not with force, with distance. He could walk into a room and change the air. That grin, unshakable. That voice, always a gear louder than anyone else's. After football, he didn't fade. He became a regular face on television. A captain again, only this time on a game show panel. Question of Sport gave him a second spotlight. And again he filled it. Joking, loud, endlessly upbeat. Until one night the line blurred. A photo round. A mud-covered jockey. And his answer came quick. John Reed, except it wasn't. It was Princess Anne. The laughter was awkward. Later, when she came on the show herself, he wrapped an arm around her shoulder, called her mate instead of ma'am. The moment caught headlines. Some laughed, some didn't. But Emlyn didn't retreat. He never had, even when the spotlight cut sharp. There were other rooms, ones without cameras, where the charm didn't land the same. After dinner circuits, private speeches, whispers about jokes that aged badly, comments about black players, a tone that belonged to another time. They're not the kind of things you find in tributes. They live in forums, in stories that start with, "I was there when he said it." Not accusations, but stains. On humour, on legacy, on the memory of a man who didn't know when to stop smiling. Then came Heysel. And Emlyn's voice changed. "Live on air," he said it clearly. "Football has died and the hooligans have won." Later, after Hillsborough, he visited the family of Andrew Devine, the boy who never woke up properly again. No cameras, no press. Just the father of two, standing beside parents whose son would never come home. That side of him was real, just harder to find. Buried beneath the noise, the performances, the reputation he built, and the one that built itself without his help. Because for every laugh, there was someone in the back row who didn't join in. He played 665 games for Liverpool, scored 49 goals in red. Across all clubs, over 630 league appearances, 43 goals, and 62 caps for England. Captain for club and country. But the numbers never told the truth about him, because what mattered was how suddenly the noise stopped. A fall, then another, then the scan. The word that doesn't wait. Tumour. He was 57. Still doing radio. Still shaking hands. Laughing in corridors. Pretending the finish line wasn't close. They gave him the odds. 1 in 10,000. He grinned and said, "Then I'll be the second to survive." But not even Emlyn could outrun that clock. He kept showing up. To chemo. To games. To interviews. He kept speaking until the voice gave out. He kept walking until the left side of his body refused to follow. But he made it to St. Paul's, walked his daughter down the aisle. Suit sharp, grip tight. One last victory over the calendar. And then he was gone. 9 November 2004. Sheffield. At home. Exactly where he said he'd go out. No anthem, no send-off. Just breath, then stillness. His grandson watches old clips now, points to the screen, sees that wild grin lifting silver, and calls him Grandad with the big cup, Grandad who lives on the cloud. That's what stayed. Not the applause, not the feuds, not the headlines. Just the weight of a man who was never neutral. Not once, not ever. Emlyn Hughes didn't want to be remembered. He wanted to be felt. And even now he still is. Subscribe. Because there'll never be another one like him, and there were plenty who made sure of that.